drink water in front of you on camera.
You know what? I dare you. You drink the water.
I did. Hello, overhead camera. I'm probably blurry. All right. Routing.
No, that's my second fear.
That's your second fear? When I do that, that's your second fear?
No, routing.
Routing is your second fear?
And that.
If you're afraid of routing,
I think I'm more afraid of that.
should be.
No, it's very scary.
It's very scary.
So many things.
But we're going to make it very simple. Just like how we made it simple by taking all these knobs and splitting it up into vertical columns. We're going to talk about buses.
I like those.
You know what a bus is?
Yeah,
Tell me what a bus is.
It's a thing that carries the same settings.
That's not a bus, Jordan. Brendan?
So like, you have 2 channels, and let's say this is the bus for these 2 channels. It like groups everything together. So instead of like messing with these, you can set that and then have the master fader for like that.
That's not a bus, Brendan.
It's not a bus.
That's not a bus.
It's not a bus.
A bus is an automobile, a mode of public transportation.
Yeah, I've been goofed.
That's where the word bus comes from. It comes from
Is that actually?
the 1800s. An omnibus was a horse-drawn carriage that was used for public transportation. And the word, I think, basically means carries everything. So, you know, it's not a private vehicle. All can go on. Anyone can get on there. It's an omnibus. And then eventually that was shortened to bus. And then, of course, horse-drawn carriages turned into automobiles. And so we have those big,
Now
I don't know, trucks, vans. No, they're buses. I don't know what else to call them. Now we have buses. And then from that same word, omnibus, that's where we get
School.
buses and audio. So a bus is you were correct, by the way. I was just being funny.
Yeah, you just be.
And you're correct. But anyway, yeah, a bus is a channel that can carry other channels, in a sense. And really, the signals are being summed into that, and maybe we'll talk about that a little bit too. But just for now, just think of it in terms of a bus. And just like public transportation, with buses, you have to think about, well, where's the bus going? What destination is it going to? And who is getting on the bus? And that's what routing is all about. It's about, you know, where are the buses going and who is getting on to these buses. So starting at the top here, this is the master bus, the master channel. And really this is a stereo bus. It's 2 different buses. There's a left bus and there's a right bus. And the left bus is coming out of this output right here through a physical cable to your PA, to the left speakers, and then the right bus is coming out of this output to the speakers on the right side of the room. So you've really got 2 different buses that are linked together into one controller here, as if it's one bus. It's a stereo bus. And the destination for this bus is the main speakers, or wherever you connect these cables. So if we want to route the bus to somewhere else, we just physically connect the cables. That's how you route where this bus is going. And we also have these buses down here. And these are also stereo buses. You see it says group 1 and 2, group 3 and 4. So there's a left bus and a right bus, and then a left bus and a right bus here. Now these buses are called sub-masters. So you've got the master bus, and then you've got the sub-masters. They can also be called subgroups, or they can be called groups, just groups. So, but the reason they're called submasters is because these buses can go onto that bus, which we'll get to in a second. But we've got the master bus, which goes wherever these cables send it to, and then we've got these 2 buses. And then we have some buses up here, our auxes, our auxiliary sends. We've got aux 1, aux 2, and then there's an FX bus. So then, you know, the big question of routing is, where are the buses going? What's the destination, and how does something get onto the bus? So we'll start with the stereo bus. Again, where the bus is going is just where you're physically connecting the cables for the master bus. But then how do you get something onto the master bus? How do we decide who's riding on that bus? So you have to assign it, and you have these buttons down here next to the faders to assign them to different buses. Down here you have ST, the red button, stands for stereo. So if I press that, well now this is going onto the master bus, and the master bus is going to carry it to the destination wherever this cables are going, which is usually the main PA. Sometimes it's going to say LR instead of ST, or sometimes it'll say main. But if all these buttons are unpressed, these channels are not getting anywhere. They have to take a bus to get somewhere. So you have to put them on a bus. You gotta assign them. What's that?
Can they walk?
They cannot walk. They can only ride a bus.
Too far.
So we gotta get them on some kind of a bus to get them anywhere. If I want them to ride on the main bus where the main bus is going, I gotta assign them all by pressing that stereo button.
Is that not?
That's just in general. All analog boards will have some kind of button there. They might have different naming schemes, like maybe Yamaha does ST, and I might be walking out of frame, but this one has LR, and there's other boards I've seen that have main. But yeah, you got to get a channel onto a bus before it can go anywhere. And then what about these guys here? To assign to group 1 and 2, I have this button up here that says 1 and 2. So if I press that, well now this channel is riding on this bus. But it's also riding on this one. So it's double routed. It's going to two different destinations at the same time, which means you're going to get twice the volume, and the volumes on these controls are going to be fighting each other, because if I turn this one all the way down, it's still there. And they're going to be pushing and pulling against each other. So you normally don't want to do that. If ultimately I want this to get to where this bus is going, I don't want it to get there by two different routes. I want it to take one route. So I'm not going to route it to the mains if I want it to ride on this bus. So if I'm going to assign it to that bus, I'm going to take it off of this bus. So now it's only going here. And what I might do is I might, for example, let's say that these are my vocals, these first 4 mics. I might put all my vocals onto a bus together. So I'll assign all those, and then I'll take it off of the main. So now all my vocals are on this bus, and now I have them all summed into this channel. And the summing process is going to affect volume. It's going to affect processing. There's math. I don't remember all the math, but it's something like 2 correlated channels combined at like 6 decibels extra volume, and uncorrelated signals combined at like plus 3 decibels, and then your processing is affected. Like if I have a high pass on the channel, and then I have a high pass on the bus, well, those are also going to combine as they get summed, and you're going to get like a more intense high pass effect through all that. So it's not just that they're getting on the bus. That's where the analogy breaks down. They're actually getting merged into a single signal through a summing process, is what that term is, and it changes how it sounds. But anyway, back to the analogy. I put them all on this bus, so now I can control them all together. So I can compress them to get that dynamic space that I want them all to sit at, and then I can set the volumes, and then I don't really need to touch these ever again, because they're compressed, so they're going to stay where I put them. And I can just use my bus. I can use my group, my submaster, to control the volume of all of them, ideally. You might occasionally have to change some things, but if you have your compression set right and you set your channel faders relatively where they need to be, you don't really need to touch them a whole lot. You can just mix with your group. But this group is not going anywhere right now, because I don't have it assigned anywhere, and I don't have a cable running anywhere. Some boards will allow you to run a cable for your submasters, like this one. There's a group 1, group 2. So just like with the master, where the master is routed where it's going physically through a cable, I could also route a group physically somewhere with a cable. But typically, you won't do that. Typically, the routing is internal. So in this analogy, the master bus is capable of carrying other buses. So it's a giant bus that can carry other buses. So if I want this to go to my main PA speakers, I need to get this bus onto that bus using the stereo button. So now these guys are riding on this bus, but they're not riding on that one. They're not double routed. But they're still getting to the main PA because I have this guy riding on that bus. And then I could do the same thing with this one. Maybe I'll put all my drums. Let's just say that those 4 drums, put all those on this bus, and then I want to take them out of the main so they're not double routed, and then I need to make sure that this guy's riding on the bus. So now they're all going to the same destination. So the master bus is carrying them physically through the cables to the PA. And then again, these are sometimes called submasters or just subs. So if you're on an analog board and you see subs, don't think subwoofer, think submaster. They're called submasters because they're capable of riding on the master bus. But they could also just be called subgroups or groups. And on a digital board, you're going to be calling them groups more often than anything else. But just be aware that there's different names for different things. And now we also have these buses here, our auxiliary sends. How do we get those onto the master bus? We can't. That's why they're called auxiliaries. They go somewhere completely different. So this could be, for example, a monitor. I don't want my monitor tied into my master mix. I want it to be a completely different mix. And maybe auxiliary 2 is a bus that's going to a live stream or a recording. So it's a completely different destination, completely different bus. It's an auxiliary bus. The way that I get a channel onto a bus, in this case, there's no button. I just have all these knobs here, these auxiliary knobs, which I'm turning them all down to demonstrate. So right now, nothing is riding on the auxiliary buses. But if I want this guy to go to a monitor on aux 1, I can turn it up. And now it is on the aux 1 bus, which is physically arriving at its destination through a cable that comes out of right there. And then the aux 2 is right here. And then I can mix them. I can mix my main down here with my faders, and I can mix what they're hearing in the monitor by changing the volume on these guys. If I want them to, or if they want to hear more of the vocal here, I can make that louder. And maybe they want to hear the kick a little bit, I can make that a little bit softer. So I have 2 different mixes going on now here between my aux sends up here and then my faders down here for the main PA. This one, it says aux 1 pre. Pre is short for pre-fade. And what that means is the signal at this point is unaffected by my processing in my fader position. And I think my stereo pan also. It's not affected by any of that. It is affected by the mute. So if I mute it, they won't hear anything in the monitors or in the house. You know, mutes are global. They affect everything. But because this is aux 1 pre-fade, it's just getting what's coming out of the preamp. So it'll be affected by the preamp gain. I think it's also affected by the high pass, because that just makes sense, and I'm pretty sure that is how that works. But it's not affected by anything else. And that's typically what you want for a monitor send, because we want it to be a completely separate mix. So I don't want my fader adjustments or my EQ adjustments to be affecting what they're hearing in the monitors. I just want that affecting the house. But there may be some situations where you do want it affected by those things, like especially if you're doing a separate mix for recording, and you're not able to have a separate engineer listening on headphones mixing the recording. You're not able to give dedicated attention to the mix for the recording. In that case, you might want an aux 2 that is post-fade, meaning that it is actually affected by the changes you're making in the house. So you're mixing the house, and then that's also going to feed into what you're doing on that aux end. So this one is aux 1 pre, this one is aux 2, and then there's a button to make it pre if I want it to. But if I have that button unpressed, well, now I can use this for a recording, for example, and I can more or less mix it the way that I'm mixing through the house, sort of. doesn't work exactly like that. It is a separate mix, but it's just affected by the changes that I'm making there. So I can make this pre, or I can leave it post. But yeah, those are your auxiliary buses. And then this has an effects bus. It has a digital effects processor, which you can control here. You can select the different effects that it has there. And then you have your volume here for the effect. You know, how much of an effect are you adding? The effects bus. Does this have an output? I feel like it does. I think that's an output. Yeah, that is an output. So you could send the wet signal, you know, the signal that is processed by the effect, independently of the dry signal, the signal before it's processed. You could take that processed signal and you could send it. You could send that bus somewhere, you know, through the effects unit. So, for example, if I wanted to be able to control an effect through a fader, I could send this bus out of a cable here into a channel, and now I have the wet signal going into a channel, and I can control that with a fader. So I can give this bus that destination, or it just works internally without needing to do that. So I can just select an effect, and I can route this channel to that bus by turning it up here, and then it works like an insert. You know, it goes to the effects processor, and then it comes back in to the channel strip at this point. So you've got those different buses. Another thing just to note, again, the master bus is technically two different buses. It's a stereo bus. You've got a left one and then a right. So you could actually separate them and send them to different locations. So for example, I could send, if I'm running it in mono, I could send my left to the house, and I could send my right to, say, recording or live stream, and then it's kind of like a matrix. You're getting a copy of the main mix at that point. Not ideal, but there may be some situations where you have to get creative and do stuff like that. But it's just good to know that you can physically route buses different places with the cables and give them different destinations. I think that's just helpful to think about in terms of routing. It's where are the buses going, thinking in terms of public transportation, what is the destination of each bus, and then who is getting on that bus. That's what routing is all about. And let's just pause there, and then I'm just going to go over some of the inputs you have up here, some of this stuff, phantom power. We'll just go over that real quick, but just pause there. Any questions about routing or anything so far? All make sense? Is routing clearer than it was before, or did the bus analogy make it more confusing?
The bus analogy helps.
It really helps?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So basically I explained that the word bus literally comes from the word bus. You know, a vehicle that carries things.
Right.
Public transportation comes from the word omnibus, you know, carrying all. So that's what this is. It can carry anything. You can put different channels on it. Get some more water.
Channels get on the bus, they don't get back off. The whole bus goes to the speakers. Yeah, wherever it's going.
Right. So then up here, we've got a few different things that you can plug in. At the top here, this is for a balanced cable. If you were in the soldering workshop, we talked a little bit about balanced lines. You could watch the recording for that. You were there digitally, you edited that workshop. I don't think we talked about impedance. Don't really want to get into that right now, but you know, this is for a balanced cable like an XLR. And then you have line. So line is referring to a certain signal strength. So if I'm plugging in a microphone here, that's going to be a weaker signal, and I'm probably going to end up gaining it up a lot more. If I plug in, say, a keyboard or a computer, or something with a line level signal, stronger signal, it's not going to need as much amplification, and that would go in there. I might not gain it up at all, depending on how strong the signal is. We'll get to inserts in a moment, but then when we come down here, you'll notice instead of inserts, you have left and right. So this is a stereo channel, 9 and 10. If I just plug in a microphone there, well, it's not stereo now, it's just mono. Or if I plug in a 1/4 inch to that top input there, it's just mono. But I can make it a stereo channel if I plug in to there and there. So that would be like if you're running stereo keys or playing music off a device or something. Right? Yeah, you have that option of stereo. And that's a good thing to be aware of when you're buying soundboards, because they'll say it's got 20 channels, but like 4 of them are stereo channels. So it's really not that many channels. So this is 12 channels, but really it's 10, and 2 of them are stereo channels. Actually, there's some more that we'll get to in a second. It's 16 channels. These are stereo, 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 stereo.
Real quick,
Yeah.
Like let's say you have the XLR plug into channel 1.
Yeah.
And then you also have the line.
I do not know. It won't take both, but I don't know how it switches. If it's whichever one you did first, or if there's one that takes priority. I don't know.
think it would be wise to do that, but just because.
I don't think it plays both. I think I've done that before, and it didn't.
It just breaks it.
Yeah, not a good idea. And then up here, we do have a couple more channel strips that do not have gain knobs. So what does that tell you about these channels?
They don't work.
No,
Sorry.
They're just for show.
they don't have preamps. There's no gain, there's no preamp. So this is where, when gain and trim start to become distinguished, you might see a trim knob here instead of a gain knob. And that's just a volume control. It's not actually a physical like preamp circuit. Or you might not have anything there. In this case, there's not anything there, but if you look up here, it says -10 dB. So there's actually a pad in here. A pad is a circuit that reduces or attenuates signal by a fixed amount. So these channels are designed for very hot signals. Something that comes in so hot that you not only don't want to amplify it, but you actually want less of it. So when you have something really hot, you plug it in here, and then it's gonna take off 10 decibels. And then you also notice they don't have the swept mid-range on all of these. And it's down here, but not up here. I don't know why that is. That's just what they decided to do. And then we've got some other, and then we've got RCA and 1/4 inch there. We've got another channel here, 2TRN, that stands for, what is it? It's a 2-track, I think, 2-track in. So that's designed like for older media sources, like an old tape player or CD player that uses an RCA connection. There's no channel strip for it, so you don't have anything preamp or processing, but if you look down here, there's the volume for that.
So technically, I could plug my Wii into this.
You could plug your Wii into that.
And technically, it mixes. Yeah, it mixes.
Yeah, and
And you can mix it.
Would it literally just be the sound?
It would just be, you're not going to send video into your soundboard.
Not gonna go.
You can turn up your Wii menu music there. Ambient music.
Take out the lows.
Take out the lows. And then there's a routing control here. It says to stereo unpressed. So when it's unpressed, this is going to the main master bus. And when I press monitor, there must be a monitor output on here somewhere right there. So this has a dedicated monitor output, and there's probably a control for that. Yeah, right here. But monitor in this case is not referring to like a wedge on the stage or in-ears. This is referring to like your monitor as the mixing engineer. So like headphones, or you might have a wedge for yourself. Sometimes engineers will do that. Like, you want to hear what they're hearing, especially as a monitor engineer. So you might have like a wedge by your desk. So that's the same kind of wedge that they have on stage. Or like in Chapel or HKP, we have like little studio monitors. So that's what monitor is referring to here. I mean, you could use it for whatever you want. But if you want like a couple monitors for yourself, you can run that out of there, and I could route it. I could route the tape to there. I guess if I want to listen to my Guardians of the Galaxy mixtape on my old tape cassette player, I could plug it in there and then route it to my monitors and have some jams going that no one else hears. So you've got that, and then there's a dedicated headphone jack, and you've got control right there. Okay, so it's monitor / phone. So this controls both. They're tied into each other. It's one volume control for your monitors and your headphones. This is interesting. So if I have this unpressed, I'm listening to the stereo. Oh, okay. So if I want to listen to my main mix and I leave this button unpressed, well then this is going to give me my master bus. So the master bus goes to two different destinations now, the house and to my phones. If I press it, then I can listen in on a specific group, and I can select the group with this button. So when it's unpressed, now I'm listening to group 1 and 2. When I press it, now it's listening to group 3 through 4. So I can monitor different things like that. The pre-fade listen button, PFL, sometimes it'll say solo. I think it says solo on that soundboard. This allows you to see the signal if it's plugged in. So this can be helpful for setting gains. I think even if it's off, you still see a signal. Check. Yep, you can see that. So I can see what's coming in through the preamp. Pre-fade listen, again, pre-fade, it's not affected by processing or the fader. I'm just listening to what's coming out of the preamp. So if I had my headphones on right now with the pre-fade listen button pressed, and I have my headphones on, I can hear this channel straight out of the preamp, and the meter is going to show me that channel by itself. And then if I press other channels, well then that's all going to go to the meter, and it'll go to my headphones. On digital consoles, I don't know how naming conventions change, but they put PAFL, and so I call it PAFL. I'm not the only one that calls it PAFL. I've heard other engineers call it PAFL, and that's why I started calling it PAFL. But then there's some engineers I run into where I'll say PAFL, and they're like, the what? So it's not a standard way of pronouncing it, but it's a common way of pronouncing it, PAFL.
Pre and
after fade.
So you can set it to pre or after.
Right.
When you solo.
So I guess that's why on the digital console they changed it, because you can't do that on analog.
Right, like on the Avantis, you can set it to listen after when you press that button. So you listen to all of the stuff, whatever.
Right.
But it's like a setting in the console.
Right. And then you got phantom power here. And it tells you which channels phantom power applies to. Some consoles will give you an individual phantom power control. Some of them, it's just one control for everything. So just be aware of that you're not sending phantom power to things that you don't, or you don't have things plugged in there that you don't want to send phantom power to. Don't put ribbon mics into a board like this. You'll accidentally fry things. This applies phantom power to channels 1 through 11 and 12. 13, 14, 15, 16 are not affected by the phantom power. So read things. It's good to read things. Oh yeah, and then the inserts. I never got to the inserts. Unfortunately, I don't think we have the right cables for me to demonstrate in the insert. But basically, there's different ways to do effects. Like I already showed you, you can use the built-in effects send here, which sends it to the effects processor and then routes it back into the channel strip at the same point here. Or you could run out of the effects output and put it into a channel so I can control the effects with a fader. If I wanted to, if I had like an effects unit, like a reverb or a de-esser or a compressor that I like or something, and I want to insert that into the channel strip, you would use a TRS connector, but I think it's different on some boards than others, but one of the bands sends the signal out to the effects processor, and then the other band actually returns it. So the same connector sends the signal out and returns it from the effects processor. It's like a circle. And what completes the circle is the processor. So you have like that TRS end, and then it splits into two TS cables I feel like I might have seen one somewhere when we did inventory, but I checked the inventory, I couldn't find it. But yeah, you'd use a cable like that, and you know, you'd put one end into the input on the FX processor and the other end into the output, and then you know it'll go out and it'll come back in on the same jack there, the same connector. So you're inserting something new into the FX processor. And that's about it for analog boards. I'm probably gonna step out of camera, but I just want to show you some things that are different on this one, just so you're aware how things might be laid out differently. This one, phantom power is a switch up here. This has mute buttons instead of on buttons. This one, instead of a stereo button that puts all the buses onto a master bus, you have individual assignment for the left and the right. So I could put all this into the left of the master bus, and I could put this one to the right of the master bus. So different analog boards will be set up in different ways, but that kind of gives you a good idea of some of the different features you'll encounter. There's also a foot switch. I've never used those. That just allows you to control effect parameters. I think this is just on and off, so I can turn it on and off with the foot switch. Pretty cool. So yeah, there we go. Analog soundboard.
Cool.
Yay. Any questions? No questions? That was like the Sonic animation. What time are we at? We're at like 4:51.
It's time for you to get a watch.
Yeah.
He has a watch.
All right.